there's such a different feeling of how we're playing from day one to day four when you're playing 4 nights in a row, right? Day one, it's just an overabundance of ideas and energy, and everybody's amped up. Day four, oftentimes I feel like we're tired, and that sometimes makes for the best improvisational moments because no one is trying too hard to like assert themselves, and things just come more naturally when it almost becomes like a sort of like a second nature sort of thing where the subconscious is doing things more than your critical thinking conscious being active, if that makes any sense.
So here we are with Umphrey's McGee's very own Mr. Joel Cummins. Joel, awesome to have you here today. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great. It's good to be here, talk about some music and other exciting things.
So Joel, you guys have a new album coming, Asking for a Friend. To start this off, you want to tell me a little bit about the album? Like, what's the story behind this?
So Asking for a Friend, which is coming out July 1st, started way back in September of 2019. We were in a studio working with Ryan Hewitt, who a lot of people may know from producing people like Red Hot Chili Peppers, the Avett Brothers, who, interestingly enough, were playing against each other yesterday here in New Orleans at Jazz Fest. But Ryan's done a ton of stuff over the years, and so we wanted to bring in somebody with a little bit of a new voice to help us craft some new songs. Suck City was actually the first one that came out of that whole recording session, and we got 2 more tracks done with Ryan at that point. And so we were thinking, we'll probably get together and finish this up sometime in 2020 and put it out for, maybe the beginning of our 2021 tour. So that obviously didn't happen, but we got together a bunch of times over the course of the pandemic. And all these times we were doing webcasts at night. We did one from the Boondock studio at Jake's place in Niles, Michigan. We did one from our warehouse where all our gear was kept in Chicago. And then we did another one at Chris Meyer's home studio in Nashville, Tennessee. So we did these webcasts at night, and then during the day, and I think maybe 1 or 2 days before we did the webcast, we got together and worked on new music and laid down some basic tracks and got things done. So by the time all of this stuff was done in February, we had 14 new tracks that we were, pretty confident, feeling like these were good. And the idea was we were going to try to whittle it down to about 10. And so we kept talking about it and talking about it. We even did like an anonymous secret vote to name what our least favorite songs were, and there was just no consensus. And so we just kind of said, fuck it, let's just put 14 tunes out, and everybody can pick what their favorites are, and that way nothing gets kind of left behind and scuttled. And hopefully these new songs will all be in the live rotation pretty soon.
Nice. So Joel, I want to talk about the trademarked ultra badass Umphrey's vibe. Like, can you talk to me about where you guys draw your confidence from?
Well, I think there's definitely a fake it till you make it thing with as far as our confidence goes. Fortunately, we're 6 guys that are good friends and buddies up there trying to push each other musically and have fun doing it. And I think starting with that sort of ethos that, really we want to have a good time, and we're trying to give our fans an opportunity to come to a show and also, just let go for a little bit and forget about whatever else is happening in the world or in their lives, and just be in the moment and be present to what's happening with the music and the community that's there at the shows. So I think the confidence part really comes from that, of just knowing that we trust in each other up there on stage, and that we're gonna put on a good show and have a great time doing it.
Can you talk to me about some of the things you guys think you've done right as a band to have the positive morale that's allowed for this kind of longevity of you guys staying together and not like ripping at each other's throats?
Oh, there's plenty of ripping at each other's throats. Don't worry. Um, no, but it really comes back to, I think there are a few things, and one of them is not letting the highs get too high, not letting the lows get too low. You know, we can get kind of stuck in our own little bubbles sometimes, and this goes for everyone. And things start to take on too much weight and too much meaning, and then you take a step back and to quote Ryan Stasek, it doesn't matter. So it's it's something that can kind of put you in your place as well about your role in the universe, and you're just a small little part of this big cosmic entity. So don't let the little things get to you too much. And another thing that we've always kind of said to each other is like, look, if you have a problem about something, it's really important to just talk about it and to bring it up with your friend at the right time. Probably not right before you go on stage, and talk things through and hash them out and make sure that you get things resolved and you don't let something small become something big. I've said a lot of times for those of you who have been watching and enjoying music for 20, 25 years, VH1 used to have this thing called Behind the Music, and they went through the careers of all these, ultra famous bands and, bands that broke up that you're always wondering, well, what's the story? Why'd they break up? And like more often than not, it's like, okay, somebody got into hard drugs. Somebody was like cheating with someone else's wife in the band. Or somebody didn't talk about something small and let it become something big, and then they couldn't come back from there. So I think trying to avoid those three things have really just kind of helped keep us focused over the years. And the one other thing that I would say that we've done that's a little bit different than most touring bands, we don't go out for 5-6 weeks at a time on a tour. We'll do 3 or 4 show weekends, and then everybody goes home and sees their families and stuff. And so I think that has helped keep both the creative balance going on the road and a nice balance with our families and loved ones at home.
I love that. Joel, with the institutional knowledge you've accumulated from all these years of doing Umphreys, if you could go back and talk to yourself in those early days and impart some advice to knucklehead Joel, what might you say?
Stop dressing like an idiot. I would say just the most important thing is just to keep playing and to keep writing. Just the practice of actually doing the music, I think, is the most important thing. And in some senses, it almost doesn't matter as much what you're doing as long as you're doing something and exercising that part of your brain that captures the musical language and that musical knowledge. And I would also say to my younger self, read Victor Wooten's books earlier. Vic is the man, and I actually wrote a book a couple years ago called The Realist Guide to a Successful Music Career, and was lucky enough to have Victor participate in that one. And one of the things that he talks about that I talk about with a lot of my music students too is that just start playing with other people and just continue playing, and don't worry about so much of, is it right or is it wrong, or is this would somebody else that I look up to do it this way. His analogy that he gave for that, he said, do babies, as they're learning how to talk, or they're not talking because they don't know what a noun is or a verb is? No, they just do it. And that's how the musical language should be. We need to speak it, and we need to play it with other people to really get more knowledge of it, and worry about the conventions and the meanings and all this a little bit later.
Kind of an abstract follow-up question. How would you sum up your musical philosophy?
Oh, man. Yeah, I mean, I can remember, 20, 25 years ago, thinking to myself, like, when will I have my own sound? Which is kind of a funny question. I mean, we all have our influences in the people that we look up to, and we learn licks from certain people and things like that. And I think I was asking the wrong question, because what I really was trying to achieve was being able to play what I heard in my head instantaneously, and being able to react to what other people were playing with an idea that I have that I can execute well. So that's something that I think is really at the heart of my philosophy as a musician, which is really just, let's have a musical conversation and create something interesting. So, I think it's rooted in the knowledge of being able to be a good listener, and to not only identify what somebody else is playing, but also um, cut down that time between identifying, like kind of immersing yourself in it, and then being able to respond back, whether it's something that is counterpoint, or something that is more of a call and response thing, or something that is layering and texturing underneath whatever the other person said to give it more of a context. So yeah, for me, I think it's really rooted in my music philosophy is rooted in focusing on the musical conversation, um, and really listening to help define what I'm contributing.
Can you elaborate on like the true power of music composed spontaneously? Like you mentioned that instantaneous communication. Like I'm curious to hear your take on really the magic of improvisational music in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, I think it starts with music as a language, just like you and I are talking right here. So there are lots of ways to tap into that magic, but I think you have a better chance of doing it when the communication level is on a higher level. And part of it is the listening and the allowing be a good thing, though, when sometimes you're playing something and you're not sure, is this cool, is this good? And then if one of your other bandmates kind of gives you the acknowledgement of like, oh yeah, keep going with this, then it can, to circle back, help give you that little level of confidence that like, okay, maybe I am doing something cool and we should keep going with this. So I think that's kind of, that's part of achieving it. And then the second part of getting to that improvisational magic is knowing how far you should take it, and when is the right time to kind of wrap up an idea and start something else. And a lot of that is kind of based on us feeding off of the crowd energy. um, so we can kind of tell, we're like, oh man, like the whole room is moving, they're digging it, like don't move on to the next idea, sort of thing. So a little bit of it, I would say, is reactionary too. Finding those grooves that are really working. And it's weird because some nights the magic and the cohesiveness seems to really flow, and it's like anything you do just works. And then there are other nights, for no tangible reason, where you just feel like you're pushing a boulder uphill all night. you know and sometimes when I listen back to those things, I can tell. And sometimes when I listen back to those things, it's like, oh no, this was still good. It was just feeling weird to me in the moment. So I think that's the other acknowledgement that we all kind of need to make during improvisational moments is there are lots of times when personally, I'm going to feel uncomfortable, or somebody's going to feel uncomfortable on stage. That doesn't necessarily mean it's bad.
Mm, I love that, and I love how you brought up the yes and with improv comedy. We were talking to Keller on this podcast a few weeks ago, and I asked him like how he thinks comedy and music kind of like overlap. Um, I'd love to hear your take on that. Like, do you draw inspiration from things outside of music, like comedy or other art forms like that?
Yeah, I mean, we're always joking around. I mean, I think that's part of what kind of helps us keep things light in the moment. There's definitely before we go on stage, like the last 10 minutes, it's best if we're like standing around trying to make each other laugh. And, musical jokes are abundant for sure. And I haven't seen the Beatles Get Back thing yet, but a couple of the other guys in the band did this. Like hours and hours of footage of them, and they were telling me they're like, oh my god, they're like it's us in the studio doing the same thing, like joking around, and then you know you do a take, and it's like okay, next joke, and these guys are putting out songs that like you know millions of people have listened to for years and years and years. So um, I think there's kind of a good thread about, we're musicians, we're entertainers. And um, so for that reason, like, don't take yourself too seriously, right?
Mm.
I mean, it's so easy to become kind of a tongue in cheek relic when you do that, when you take things too seriously as a musician. So it's like, take the music seriously, but don't take yourself too seriously, right?
Mm.
Um, so yeah, I'd say there's definitely plenty of comedy there, and I mean, any good band has lots of inside jokes that they share with each other constantly. So and then there's also the kind of poking fun at each other sort of thing. And after being in the band for 25 years, every person's little foibles and gullibilities and things like that. So it's been good over the years to be able to do little pranks, and you get more creative too as things go on. And you think, what are the possibilities here? So we did this once when it was Brendan's birthday. There's a song called "Syncopated Strangers," one of Jake's tunes that we play, and Jake sings the front half of it, and Brendan sings the second half of it, as far as the lead vocal goes. And so Bob, our monitor engineer, muted Brendan in his in-ear mix and turned my vocal mic up, and I sang his part, and so he's singing into the mic, but he's only hearing me. And then after probably two lines or something, he realizes he's not hearing himself at all. And he looks over like, what's going on? And the vocal's still going. So funny little jokes like that are good. That's always good. um, I don't think we've done this one yet, but we've always talked about you know leaving someone out on stage, like being like, okay, break it down, bass solo, and then slowly we all creep off stage and just don't come back for like 15 minutes. Yeah, we haven't done that one yet, but maybe soon. Maybe if we have a birthday gig for Ryan's birthday, we can pull that one off. Um, yeah, but it's fun to be able to do those sort of things, and to be lighthearted about some aspects of the performance, and remember that a lot of it is us having a good time. Here's another good one that recently happened. We in Aspen went out to dinner to Matsuhisa sushi place in town, and our promoter and venue owner Michael Goldberg, also that's his restaurant, and so he was telling us a story about how he was so embarrassed somebody brought him out and made him play drums on something once, and he's like, I'm just not a very good drummer, and I couldn't believe they did that, and so Chris gets up and is going to do a little drum solo, and he's like, hey, ladies and gentlemen, we got our very special guest tonight, please give it up for Michael Goldberg. He's like, just kidding, I'm going to play this solo with chopsticks. And he literally plays a drum solo with chopsticks. And one of the a deeper level of this joke. So Chris, I would say at least once a show we have talkback mics that just go to the band and our monitor engineer and our lighting director, and he'll say, hey Bob, uh, could you ask Chris Mitchell how the snare is sounding out there? And the rest of us are always like, listen, bro, if the snare were sounding bad, he would say something to Bob and tell you, like, tune the snare down, turn the snare up, to try a different snare. He's not saying anything. That means it's sounding good, right? So Chris is playing along with doing his little chopstick solo. And I go back into the talkback and it's like, hey, Chris Mitchell says the snare sounds great. Don't change a thing. Keep it just like that. It's like this super soft, sounds like he's playing with brushes or something. Yeah, so things like that happen too.
I love how you brought up Victor Wooten, though. I've read his book, The Music Lesson, where he talks about the 10 elements of music with this Michael, the shaman guy.
Yes.
So talking about those elements of music, is there individual dynamics of music that you feel most connected to, or maybe even would want to open more musicians' minds up to?
I love that. So I grew up playing piano, but I also grew up really involved in singing and a lot of choir stuff, a lot of mixed choirs, men's choirs, things like that. So that I feel like singing with a group of 40 people and nailing really complicated dynamics was what really taught me that this was something that was extremely powerful that you could do with a band as well, right? So yeah, I think that is often an overlooked thing about performance, and what I'm talking about is using dynamics to really kind of capture a more emotive and emotional aspect of the music. So a lot of times I think in the rock band setting, you get a lot of forte and double forte. A lot of times it's a lot of loud stuff, and so it's definitely something where we have actively tried to have those moments in shows where we bring it way down. And especially for shows in our scene of like the improv rock jam sort of thing, there's a kind of a generalization that the audiences aren't always the most attentive. There's a lot of socialization going on. So I think those quiet moments can be really good for getting people to shut the fuck up, and you bring it down and all of a sudden people become a little more self-aware and become a little more also aware of what's happening with the music. So it's great to just blast people's heads off with intense rock and roll, but it's also really effective to bring it down and see what you can do at a lower dynamic. And so to go off on the other thing that you mentioned there, space, I think that's something that we have worked on in Umphrey's McGee, trying to create more space every single gig, every single year. It's something we're working on, because with 6 people playing, there can be a lot of space filled. So as a keyboardist, it's kind of nice because it's easy for me to lay out and take a little break to create some space. So a lot of times we'll do these breakdowns where we're like, okay, let's go back to just bass drums perk and start something from there and build it up from there. Or we'll do stop cues. Okay, stop cue to just guitars and create something new. And I think the most challenging times to come up with those ideas of space and everything are the first gigs of a run, the first gigs back after a little time off. Everyone is so excited to play. And one thing I don't hear too many musicians talk about, but I feel like there's such a different feeling of how we're playing from day 1 to day 2 to day 3 to day 4 when you're playing 4 nights in a row, right? Day 1, it's just an overabundance of ideas and energy, and everybody's amped up. Day 2, you can feel it in your fingers a little bit. You're like, okay, yeah, we played a show last night. Day 3, you're like, okay, I got to push a little harder today to get that energy level there. And day 4, oftentimes I feel like we're tired, and that sometimes makes for the best improvisational moments, because no one is trying too hard to like assert themselves, and things just come more naturally when it almost becomes like a sort of like a second nature sort of thing, where the subconscious is doing things more than your critical thinking conscious, being active, if that makes any sense. So I think the space element of it is a lot easier to do a couple days into shows or a tour than on night one. Night one is always the most challenging for that.
What do you think it is about when that critical thinking part of the brain kind of becomes more quiet? And like you were mentioning, the subconscious is really the thing where, what about that situation leads to such a profound musical effect, or really effect in anything in life, kind of?
I think to use a little bit of an analogy here, it goes back to what Santana was talking about with the hose, when you turn on the hose, and it's like you are really just a conduit for this music coming through you. And when you can let go of that critical thinking and super conscious element of something, the hose has a better chance of coming through, and you can be a conduit for something magical. And to tie this in a little bit with new music, since we have so much new music coming out, I think it's much harder those first few performances of any new song to tap into that, because your brain is still processing what's happening next. You have to think about, okay, what's coming up, what's next. And then anytime we have a new song, I always have this moment, and it's like 12 to 15 times into playing it, where I was like, oh, wow, I didn't really think about what I was playing there. My hands knew what to do. And one more thing that I want to tie into this, I read something from Chick Corea a year or two ago, and he was talking about the difference between memorizing a piece of music and knowing a piece of music. And memorizing, you might be able to perform it and play it technically as it should be, but knowing it, you're not even thinking about the technical aspects of how to do it anymore. Your hands know, and you are just adding, and to come back to this, you have complete control now over the dynamics, over the emotive aspects of whatever this piece of music is. And so it really takes some time to get from, memorizing a song to knowing the song. And I think the same can be true for, the idea of improvisation. Sometimes we can be up there and you're thinking too hard about what you're trying to do, and it should just be more of a flowing moment where you're just letting things happen, and letting musical ideas come into your brain. And the only part of your brain that you're really using is that interpretation of the language.
I dig it. Nice. Joel, jumping a little bit to the side here. So you mentioned this earlier. You have a book, The Realist Guide to making it in the music industry?
It's a Realist Guide to a Successful Music Career.
Successful music career. Can you talk to me about some things you admire most about other artists, in terms both their approach to music, but also their approach to marketing?
Okay. Starting with the musical part, to go back to an artist you just had on here a couple weeks ago, Bill Frisell, one of my favorite musicians of all time. And with Bill, the thing that I notice the most is that he has created his own sound, but it never sounds like he's pushing too far to try to impress someone. He's one of those guys that you hear him play and you're like, wow, he played at all the right times, and he added interesting notes and interesting, arrangements, or, scalar notes onto chords that you're like, oh, I wouldn't have thought of that. But for whatever it is, he just seems so in tune with whatever he's trying to do in the moment. And I should mention, for people listening that don't know Bill Frisell, you got to check out his catalog. And he's got stuff from, psychedelic instrumental grooves with a full band, sometimes with horns and strings. I'm thinking about Unspeakable, to, one of my favorite plain albums that I put on to just kind of chill me out, which I assume is a collection from different recordings, but I have no idea. He might have done it all at once, but it's the best of Bill Frisell. I think it's folk songs, maybe, so something like that. Um, and then and then he's got I've seen him live in multiple different settings. Saw him once with I think it was Matt Chamberlain and John Bryan in LA, and it was just a complete improvisation gig. And so to hear him kind of come up with melodic ideas in the context of improvisation has been really inspiring, I think, to particularly Jake and me as people that are trying to do that, because he makes improvisation sound so composed sometimes. And so I think when you can do that and kind of treat improvisation as like melody and harmony creation, you're going to come up with a lot more interesting improvisational ideas that are also easier to digest for the audience. So, yeah, musically, he's just somebody that I just, every time I can't wait to dig into, whatever he has. And he's got such a huge catalog. Like, I haven't even gotten through everything of his, because I'll find something that I really love and I'm like, oh man, I'm just going to listen to this over and over. So there aren't too many artists that can do that for me, that make me want to listen to something over and over. So, so yeah, I'd say that's cool for him. As far as like a marketing thing, it's a good question. I mean, here's the thing. Like, I feel like there are some people who have gotten really good at the idea of how to cultivate their audience and how to get through to them. And for the most part, that stuff only really works if the music is good. You can't have a huge audience. I mean, maybe it's true for, like a top 40 artist or something who has a, one really big hit, right? But as far as like the bands that are out there touring like ours, you can't, I think the expression is like whipped cream on shit. You can't, pull the wool over people's eyes for an entire career and like, oh man, their music isn't that great, but they really connect with their fans. It's just not going to work. So, so I tend to think of it more as like, there are a lot of people out there who are doing great things musically and have a team that is in tune with what they're doing and what their audience likes about that artist. So I don't think there's any really like big trick to that other than continuing to keep people engaged. That is, in the 21st century, when people's attention spans are shorter than ever, it's really important to just keep putting out new content, whether it's, music or like little videos from backstage or, any handful of things that seems to focus on what the audience, what it is the audience likes about your music and what you do. So, I think there are obviously a lot of people who are on our scene that have great teams of people assembled that are doing that. A lot of the kind of the up and coming bands like Billy Strings and Goose and the Main Squeeze. Like I see these guys doing a lot of great stuff with their social media and just general fan engagement. Obviously, that's something that Umphrey's McGee has really tried to stay on top of as well, using lots of available technologies and trying to make sure that we give our fans who Umphrey's has such a diverse sound that there are some people that like the more metal stuff, there's some people that like the dancier stuff, there's some people that like the more the improvisational stuff. So we're always trying to kind of feed these different aspects of what it is with Umphrey's McGee that our fans might enjoy.
So Joel, without any huge spoilers, talking about the Realist Guide to a Successful Music Career, what do you feel like are the most impactful pieces of advice that you distilled into that book?
Well, first of all, you can get the book on Amazon. You can buy it from our website. There are lots of ways to do it. We have some autographed copies available as well. I can also personalize them for you. So there's a lot of good self-deprecating personalization in there available. Um, the number one thing I would say is what the book actually starts with. And so this won't be too much of a spoiler. I should say one more thing about the book, which is each chapter has a conversation with a different artist or somebody in the music industry. So a lot of it is going in and just kind of getting these other people's experiences in there so that you can see there's so many different paths to success. And success is also something that you can define in a lot of different ways. There's not, one version of success that you have to achieve, right? It can be different things for different people. But the most important thing is where it starts, and that is with the passion test. So that's basically saying, like, would you want to be doing this if you weren't getting paid for it? Would you want to be doing what you're doing if you had a choice to do something else? Is this what you would choose? And the biggest thing that I think people notice might not be confidence, but might be passion and inspiration. And so that's not something that you can fake. You might be able to fake it for a short time, but you can't fake that long term. And so I think it's really important that for people that are considering pursuing a career in music, if you want to be a performer at this, you've got to have that passion there. This has got to be something that you can't live without. And I think, for other positions in the music industry, it's important that you really like music, that you want to do this. I do know a few people, and it's kind of funny, who, work behind the scenes in production. They're like, yeah, I don't really listen to music. I just like NPR, which is, okay, that's fine. But it's kind of funny that this is what you would choose, So I would say that. I would say, ask yourself, do you have the passion that is going to be required to, it's going to take a lot of dedication for people to make it. There are very few cases these days where a musician has just started and 2 or 3 years later, they're super popular. And that can also be a dangerous thing because without the experience, it can be hard to know how to deal with things and what are the right decisions to make about, both musically and from a business perspective. So, yeah, I think, just do that passion test. That's the most important thing.
So listening to some of your interviews before this, I heard you mention Seth Godin. Everyone out there listening, Seth Godin, huge inspiration in this podcast. He's been on this podcast as a guest. And Joel, I'd love to hear you talk about like some of the things you've learned from Seth.
Well, I think the biggest takeaway that I got from reading Seth Godin's Tribes was how to cultivate your audience. And, this is something, a lot of the things that I read in his book, things that we were already doing. But, events like Humble, where we take the fan interaction to another level and let the fans help kind of craft the overall event with their song choices and improvisational things. Finding ways to continually engage the people who are interested in what you do is such an important thing, giving people that outlet. And I think, another thing that we're just so fortunate to be in this day and age, the idea of webcasting is so amazing to, keeping audiences from all over the world interested in what you're doing. A lot of us, with families or other job commitments, things change. There are people who used to be able to go hit 50 shows a year, and they're like, now I can only hit 5. I've got other obligations. But with the, on-demand webcast stuff, it's like, oh, you can watch this in your home on, 5.1 surround or whatever, and, blast it and basically be in your concert with no bathroom line. And, you're paying $1 a beer instead of 12. So, I think the big thing is just, like I said, that engagement, and to continually try to engage and give fans that feeling that like they're really a part of something. And not only that, but to encourage fans to embrace a community with each other, because I think these friendships and, there have been so many people that have like met their significant others and things like that. Um, that sort of stuff really fosters a beautiful positivity within the fan base. And that's something that we want to be out there. That's something we want out there too. We want people to be able to come to our shows and feel like they're part of a community. And so that's a lot of what I think Seth kind of talks about. And it's pretty awesome because this day and age with a band, you can really embrace a lot of these ideas and take it to a pretty significant level. I mean, you see bands all over the place. I feel like, the biggest example of that on our scene right now is the Fish community. And anybody who's online on, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, there's just tons of interaction amongst the fans who are now all friends. And like, it's cool to see that there can be this digital way to connect with people that then results in actual physical contact where you become friends in person because of a conversation you had digitally when you were 3,000 miles away from each other.
Amen. Shout out to the Butthurt Umphreaks.
Yeah.
Joel, awesome, my man. So for everyone out there listening, asking for a friend, keep your eyes peeled for that. Joel, I got one more question for you as we're wrapping up here. I'd love to hear your take on darkness in art and how you think that can ultimately be a beautiful thing.
Sure. Well, I mean, Umphrey's is kind of known for being one of the heavier, darker sides of the jam band scene. And, not to say that we don't have, moments of beautiful, uplifting, major chords sort of thing. That stuff happens too. But I think that we saw a little bit of a window to where there's a little too much of like the happy, sunshiny sort of thing going on. And we're like, oh, maybe we can tap into this little darker, heavier side. And to me, I think there's a great balance of that, hitting on that stuff. And then also it's like the darker stuff makes the lighter and brighter stuff shine a little more. And then those contrasts are so much of what's at the heart of Umphrey's McGee. So I think it's great to have those dark moments and let some of that little more animalistic primal rage out. That's a good thing. So yeah, that's something that's very much what we're all about.
Amen. Joel, man, so glad to have you here. I'll be seeing you at the workout at Legend Valley. Any last words for any of your fans who's listened this far?
Well, just come out to a show, see what we're up to. I think we've got a lot of new tracks we're going to be debuting pretty soon that are we're so psyched about this. These are some of the best songs we've ever put together, and it's like the fact that we're 2.5 years into having started this and I can still listen to these songs when I listen back to them is a good sign. So yeah,
hell yeah.
We'll see you at a show out there somewhere. And thanks again for your time, Cam. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Cheers, my man.
If you got this far, thank you for tuning in. Big shout out to our sponsor, J&J Distribution, Ohio's premier CBD and Delta 8 wholesale supplier. Check out their brands Death by Gummies, Treetop Gummies, Compassionate Buds, and Kush Burst Gummies. Also, big shout out to our sponsor, SEM Tickets. If you're looking for reasonably priced, reliable ticketing source for your events, check them out. Got SEM Tickets link in our bio, got J&J Distribution's link in our bio, retailers. Check out J&J Distribution, and yeah, much love, y'all.